Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is, it's July 7th, 2022. And apparently it's the end of the prime ministership of Boris Johnson or something like that. I'll have to catch up with Greg when he stops by. What did I see today? In the few seconds I was able to glance at the news in between all the other stupid tasks I had this morning. Boris Johnson has resigned, but resigned as what? I don't know. He is the prime minister of Great Britain, of course, but I began seeing people talking back and forth about there being a fine point on this, and of course, more to the point, people discussing that apparently he wasn't particularly contrite in this resignation. Of course, he could be resigning as a member of parliament, he could be resigning as prime minister. I imagine this prime minister is what we're talking about. Very often they will then stand once again, or have by-elections and stand for election again. At any rate, the point is that whatever it was that everyone was waiting for yesterday with the accumulation of resignations from the cabinet has happened, except that I guess they thought they were going to get a more contrite resignation speech from him. I believe the quote that came out of it was, "Well, I'm sad to be giving up the job," which he described as the best job in the world, but them's the breaks. Like that was really it. Okay. So lots of people expressing some disappointment in that and looking for more from him in that respect. Greg has some notes about it, and I guess it remains to be seen exactly what the hell's going on. The note here from Greg just says he resigned, but he claims he's not leaving. And then it says to be determined. And so, okay. So now the question on the table, he says, is how do you make a prime minister leave? Well, I don't know. And I don't know how much of this he's taking from the Trump playbook. It's your system, not yours, Greg. But I don't know. Although maybe it is. You're from New England. And so you have to be able to tell us how old England works. Maybe. I don't know. I mean, I think maybe you have the least amount of pressure on you. You're the ones that declared yourselves something new and different. And I suppose if you're from one of the 13 original colonies, you got no responsibility for this whatsoever. Okay. Well, there's a lot happening, of course, on that front. We'll try and figure out some of what that is all about. It's not that difficult, I don't think, although now I see that this curveball has been thrown of a guy who says, I'm not leaving. Like, I don't know what you do. Obviously, prime ministers resign, but I guess normally they sort of stick around in a caretaker capacity until new elections can be held. I mean, you don't just abandon the government entirely, do you? I don't know. I haven't dealt with a whole lot of resignation transformations and transitions for prime ministerships anywhere. We barely knew what we were going to do in our transition. And, of course, we're in no position to talk about it. We just had the first non-peaceful transition of power in our history. So, okay. So there, I guess, is where it lies for now. Here in the United States, plenty of dumb things going on as well. One of the things you may have heard, and I'm sure we'll be discussing it at some point, is that, lo and behold, by some magic, just random happening over at the IRS, it turns out that there are some audits going on, and none of them are audits of Donald Trump, for whatever reason. That one never finished, so we'll never see his taxes, something. But in the meantime, James Comey, who you may remember, gave Donald Trump some difficulty as FBI director, and his deputy, Andrew McCabe, both of whom infuriated Trump, somehow, just by random chance, apparently, according to the actual, the actual position of the IRS, is that they both landed in the jar of people in the United States getting some of the most intensive audits of their taxes that they do. And this is apparently something that happens to one in about, I think somebody put a number to it, in the article here, about 1 in every 30,000 or so people are going to get one of these random targetings. But wow, randomly they got the top 2 officials fired from the FBI by Donald Trump. Luckily, those audits are not over, so that means you'll never see their taxes and never hear any news about it or something like that, other than the fact that the audits are going on. Unless that's different from the fake audit that was going on for Donald Trump earlier. So who knows? The difference between the fake audits and the real audits, another mystery, like what happens when a prime minister resigns but then says he's not resigning, or whatever it is that's happening there. All right, Greg, good morning, or not good morning, or maybe you're resigning from the morning. You tell me what's going on.
Well, good morning. You know,
okay.
the British system is quite interesting.
Yes.
And so let's talk a little bit about this.
All right, sure.
First
Kings
of all,
and queens, for one thing.
Yes, Boris Johnson resigned. So many people have quit his cabinet that he wasn't able to effectively govern. And the senior people, the Barry Goldwaters of the party, came in and said, no, really, it's time for you to step down. Well, they did that yesterday morning, and he didn't want to. And then by yesterday evening, it became clear that a lot of the schemes that he had to stay in power, and we'll talk about the differences between Trump, because after all, this is not somebody who lost an election and he didn't use violence. So it's not Trumpian in that regard. But the fact that he decided that he really didn't want to go and he was looking for every possible way to stay in power brought up some very interesting things. But one thing to say before we get to that is that it's an interesting dynamic within the Conservative Party, because he appointed a group of ministers and personal secretaries and this, that, and everything else, who presumably would be super loyal. And a lot of them either resigned or told Johnson to resign, or I will. Okay, so the problem is now they're seen as disloyal. And then you have a group of ministers who stuck with Johnson. And the group who told him to leave think the group who stuck with him are a bunch of cowards. And the group who stuck with him think the ones who told him to leave, which is a majority of the party, are disloyal. So now you have a very, very divided party. And that's why here in America, so many of the Republicans who know that it's a crap storm refuse to leave Trump. They just don't want this to happen to the Republican Party. I do. Well, I think they should all leave. But, I could understand why they don't want to. So that's, the background to all of this. And so there's going to be a tremendous amount of infighting. And whoever the next conservative prime minister is, because there will be a conservative prime minister, just like when Theresa May stepped down rather than an election. So there'll be a conservative. But what conservative can unite the party now? Because they hate each other.
Okay. Then,
who wants that job? That's another story. But, some of the people who were talked about as being possible replacements were made ministers like 24 hours ago, and then 16 hours ago said, no, I'm out of here. So it's a very, very weird dynamic in regard to that. But this is a piece from the Times of London, which took place just before he resigned. And it's really interesting. Listen to this. Tories fear snap election in Trumpian survival attempt. Allies of Boris Johnson suggested to the prime minister that he could try to call a snap election in an effort to stay off attempts to oust him.
Okay.
However, unlike the U.S. where there are fixed election times, it's up to the prime minister to dissolve the parliament, at least in theory, and then call another election. But technically, it's a constitutional monarchy, and the Queen has to sign off on it. And that's where it really gets interesting. In a desperate strategy, says the Times, to keep Johnson in office, his supporters are understood to have raised the prospect that he could ask the Queen to dissolve Parliament, triggering an immediate poll, that is to say, election. He's been warned against that because the Queen could say no. And here's the deal. Under what are known as the LaSalle principles, laid down in a letter to the Times, the very Times that's reporting on this, by George VI's private secretary in 1950.
Okay.
The monarch can refuse a request for a dissolution on 3 conditions.
Wow.
1, the existing parliament was vital, viable, and capable of doing its job, therefore no reason to dissolve.
Oh, well.
Number 2, an
that.
election would be detrimental to the national economy.
Okay.
And number 3, the monarch could rely on finding another prime minister who could govern for a reasonable period with a working majority. And what the conservatives arguing against Johnson trying to do this is that if you try to force the Queen into taking a position, then you're trying to make him political. And that's very embarrassing to the monarchy. Therefore, the likely result of this would be the prime minister turns to the Queen for permission to dissolve the parliament and get another election real quick, a snap election.
Yeah.
And the Queen is otherwise unavailable. I'm sorry, I can't come to the phone right now. The Queen is unavailable. Well, I've been calling every 5 minutes for the last 3 days. Right. Well, she's still unavailable. Yeah, she's and that way, you preserve her from getting involved in politics, but she's still making the decision.
Chopping people's heads off.
Yeah, but the fact that she could make the decision is just, to Americans rather weird. But one of the things that forced Johnson out is that he realized he couldn't do this. Now, it's not like he was going to wind up in the Tower of London if he tried.
Why not?
That's what I say. Why not? So, and the other thing is staying on is the best possible position, I think, for Labor and the Lib Dems, the opposition parties, because it continues the infighting and the conservatives are weakened and they're already getting clobbered in by-elections and who knows what happens. So if he called a snap election, he would lose. That's another reason why the Tories didn't want to do it. Okay, but it would be a way for him to, at least if I win, I get to stay in power.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like that's actually probably the most legitimate course to say, all right, well, we're just going to have an election. But I guess a significant portion of his party thinks that they would lose. Right.
But, fascinating things, because those dynamics don't exactly exist over here. The splitting the party and getting everybody mad at each other does. That part, I think we can take a lot of lessons from.
We don't have snap anything.
But, we don't have snap elections. We don't ask the Queen whether we can do stuff. Polls. It's just interesting.
Snap peas.
We don't have the personal secretary of the king writing a letter to the Times explaining how it works. None of that.
No, all right. Well, and it's not so far removed. It's not ancient or anything. It's the Queen's father did this.
Sure, so, but I mean, if we were going to establish, I mean, you're the expert on this, not me. But if we're going to establish a way to go from one, administration to the other, you'd think it'd be codified either in the Constitution or, if not, some laws would be written.
We would do that.
They just write a letter.
Yeah, well,
the personal secretary said, "Here's how it's going to work."
Right. Well, they're the ones with the informal, unwritten constitution that has, I don't know, that's satisfied them to date, and it is very interesting how the monarchs want so badly to stay out of politics now, as opposed to the hundreds of years in which they were all there was in terms of politics.
Well, it makes total sense. They tried to get involved. Some of them lost their heads over it, and then they said, "You know what? We're going to try to really be careful about that and preserve the monarchy," because I remember what happened last time. We have long memories.
Yeah, maybe I don't know. Maybe we need to chop people's heads off or something like this. But all right, well, he's looking to not have his head chopped off. He probably would lose the election, but I'm in agreement that there's real legitimacy to be had by having another election. I don't know if he'd lose it or not, but it's actually a pretty good political instinct, just in terms of political science for Boris Johnson.
I mean, that would be the right course of action if you could do it. The problem is, of course, his party members don't want that.
Right.
And there's two reasons.
Maybe
not
even
just
the other
that
parties,
it would embarrass the Queen. The other is they think they'd lose.
Yes. And the other parties just want to continue the problem. I'm such an egoist,
I think I could talk the country into voting for me again. I'm such a lovable rogue.
I guess.
And the rest of the party says, we're throwing you out because you're a rogue and you're not so lovable.
I guess not. All right. Well, we'll see. He most likely then won't be pressuring the Queen.
So,
well, instead, then what? Yeah, then it leaves us with.
So that's where we get to the then what. We could talk a little bit about the conservative lawmakers who could succeed him. There's some names: Liz Truss, who's the foreign secretary; Ben Wallace, who's the defense secretary; Rishi Sunak is the leading candidate, Chancellor of the Exchequer; chancellors of the exchequer tend to be viable candidates by nature of their position. Like if you're Secretary of State, that automatically makes you, with gravitas, a candidate. A few others, Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt. There's a couple others there, but of course they'd have to be vetted by the Johnson people on the one hand and accepted by the rebels on the other, and so that's why that doesn't work out all that well. So the next step is, okay, so he announces that he's resigning, but he's not leaving right away. He'll be a caretaker government until such time as leadership decides what to do, and the leadership function of the party will be decided next week.
Oh, whatever that means.
Now, there's no constitutional written, no, you have to leave.
Right. We
don't
have that.
I liken him to, okay, now that I've resigned, I'm appointing myself a volunteer. And since I'm a volunteer, you can't fire me.
Maybe.
Right? Just like I'm a volunteer to this show.
He?
David can't fire me. He's stuck with me.
That's right.
I'm not exactly an employee, so, what are you going to do?
Right. I can hang up, I guess.
I mean, the only thing you can do is not answer the phone. And that's exactly what the Queen is doing. So,
okay. Oh. Well, then I feel very fortunate.
Royal.
Regal. Yeah, all right. I'm going to start calling myself we.
Yeah.
All right.
We do not approve. So we are not amused. So the whole idea here is, so Johnson's going to try that next, but his party is going to come back and say, no, we want you out now. You don't understand. You're killing us. Not literally, but we're getting clobbered. We're losing by 20, 30 points. And it'd be like the Republicans lost by 30 points in Alabama. I mean, it's just unheard of.
All right.
If you stay, you're destroying the party. You have to go, and we're going to make you go. And we're all going to resign. You're going to have to run the government by yourself, and everybody's going to laugh at you. And so you have to go. So they're trying to talk to him in different ways to get him to leave.
Yeah,
and that's the part that's to be determined, and we'll see whether or not that works.
It's a strong counter-argument is, all right, well, who's going to do this? So somebody has to be the prime minister. There has to be somebody doing these things.
Right.
And not you, not you, and not you.
So here's a piece in The Spectator, which I've been following, center-right publication.
Okay.
And so therefore some insights into the Conservative Party.
And
they have a piece up that Boris was never Trump. Their similarities rest mainly in their enemies.
Weird hair.
The urge to compare Boris Johnson to Donald Trump was always irresistible. It's been fun. Both men are colorful characters in a political environment that elevated dullards. Mm-hmm. Both men had privileged childhoods, veteran womanizers, much younger wives. Both are brilliant electoral campaigners and great communicators, but in very different ways. And both are much hated. Yesterday, as Johnson's government collapsed on top of him and he appeared to be refusing to resign, the commentariat instantly went for the Britain-Trump illusions. Johnson desperately clinging to power, unable to face reality, refusing to respect the basic conventions of parliamentary democracy. And so rather than call it a constitutional monarchy, which it is, you could call it a parliamentary democracy, which I suppose it is also. Is it a republic or a democracy? Well, it's a democratic republic here, folks, so you get both.
Right.
Why not both? Some Twitter blowhards even started bloviating about Johnson's refusal to resign as comparable to January 6th. But it's at such moments that the Trump-Boris comparison break down. Johnson's a prime minister, not a president. He's not lost an election. He's not refused to accept the result. He just lost control of his party in a way Trump never did. And he's now bowed to the inevitable and quit. Nobody in politics is indispensable, he just said. You can't imagine Donald Trump ever saying that. And that's because Boris is, in fact, very different. So perhaps the real similarity between Trump and Johnson, they write, is their enemies. Both came to power thanks to the tumultuous year for democracies. It was 2016, Brexit, America First. Johnson and Trump took on powerful but dysfunctional establishment forces and won, but not for long. Resentment festered. How can men of such obviously dubious character continue to defeat us? That cannot happen. It's precisely because both leaders were so morally outrageous, so bungling and chaotic that they exposed what Andrew Basovich memorably called the smelly little hypocrisies of the establishment, morally outrageous, bungling, and chaotic nature of most governments. Remember, this is a conservative publication. Trump's specialism was the prick pomposity. to make his opponents so puffed up in rage they stop thinking clearly. His arrogance exposed theirs. Also, by peddling his own truths, he revealed how the political and media classes colluded to peddle theirs. Same with Boris.
Boy.
In Britain, in the last 48 hours, we've seen so many obvious charlatans talking seriously about the importance of decency in politics. We've seen political figures resigning live on air. But it's the media that insists that it's Johnson who does reality TV politics. The public doesn't dislike reality TV, but voters are in despair about the people who govern them. The majority of Americans never loved or liked Trump, but anti-Trumpism was a major phenomenon. People could see the hollowness of the politicians who stood against him. I think they're mistaking white nationalism for I hate the politicians on the other side, but that's okay. They could see, as we saw it in Britain yesterday, how cravenly politicians swung from supporting him to condemning him based on which way they thought the wind was blowing. That part is absolutely true. People despise this more than they hate any one figure, which is why we could see an anti-Boris backlash. In the months and years ahead, for now, it seems Johnson's Tory enemies have won. But as the Prime Minister suggested yesterday, they won't necessarily like what comes next.
Okay.
And that means that, firstly, they have to push him out. If they push him out, they even more split the party. And if they don't push him out, or even if they do, the voters may decide they've had enough of these clowns. So fascinating stuff, with potential lessons here.
Yes, maybe. And as frequently happens, an article about the shortcomings and weaknesses of facile political analysis eventually collapse into facile political analysis. But okay.
We see that here.
You lost track occasionally. But
I mean, it started perhaps, with the realization that, Chris Elizabeth doesn't really have anything to say.
Yes. Right. Well, and, that does happen from time to time.
My friend Chuck Todd, doesn't much have anything to say either. And, we'll leave it there after trying to do both side stuff for a while, just when it's getting interesting. Doesn't really cut it.
Okay. All right, UK, straighten out your act there so we can figure out what's going on and figure out. We just want to know who's at the head of your government. That's all. In case we need to write you a letter.
Well, the Queen.
Oh, yeah, well, always her. But I don't know what her address is anymore, so,
Right.
She doesn't want to answer.
And the Queen is, getting older every day.
Right.
And can't attend all of the different queenly functions, royal functions.
Right.
And so there's going to be a lot of interesting stuff there. So Brits are going to have the problem of not only figuring out who's the next prime minister,
right,
but also dealing with the royal transition, which is inevitable regardless, not to wish bad things on the Queen.
Well, no, it has to happen.
She can still move in every direction.
Well planned.
She's standing on one of those black and white squares.
Yes. So got a lot of freedom of movement here. That's true. They have been planning this for quite some time. I think they now know how to do that peacefully as well.
Oh, they'll do it peacefully. The problem is that they already know who's the next royal.
Yeah.
And nobody likes them.
Supposedly. I mean, I don't know. I've seen it happen before where the next royal, something weird happens and somebody else gets the job. But I think those days might be long past.
Yeah.
Although Queen Elizabeth is quite aged, and so's Charles. I mean, who knows? Anyway, they supposedly have it all worked out.
Maybe Boris Johnson thinks he's Billy Martin, and keeps coming back to manage. And so, the Queen is stepping down, Prince Charles is abdicating.
Maybe that's the article that needs to be written, and not so much comparing him to Trump as Billy Martin. That's a good thought. All right. Probably something else happened yesterday. I can't remember what it was.
Well, there's some other stuff. First of all, and we'll do a lot of this after the break because I have some interesting stuff there. Yes. But Patsy Baloney is going to testify tomorrow.
Okay. Yes, with closed door testimony.
Closed door, but videoed.
Yes, they need to have a video for later production value. They'll play us clips of what happened. But that's good. They got him to agree to do that. Not at this point. They don't have enough leverage to make him do it in one of the big shows, and they'll need to know what he has to say before they put him on the TV stand.
Well, as the Washington Post puts it, It's unclear what limits there may be on his closed-door testimony, which is scheduled for about half a day, according to one person familiar with the matter. The session will be videotaped, but there'll be some limits on what he will testify regarding direct conversations with Trump. Mm-hmm. However, he did have conversations with Meadows.
Aha.
And so, that's part of the issue here. And, again, part of the issue is what's coming up on the Tuesday 10 a.m. next
Tuesday, right?
Telenovela that we're seeing about the January 6th Commission.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and the reason is, as the Guardian puts it, Trump's possible ties to the far right militias is what's going to be examined. Mm-hmm. And the potential connection from the former U.S. president to the extremist right-wing groups came through Cassidy Hutchinson's account of Trump's order to his White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, to call Roger Stone and Mike Flynn. Get me Roger Stone, he said the night before the Capitol attack.
Yeah.
And Trump's order to Meadows, even though Hutchinson said she didn't know what was discussed, is significant, says the Guardian, because it shows the former president seeking to have a channel to two figures with close ties to the leaders of the far-right Proud Boys and Oath Keeper groups.
Mm-hmm. Yes, right.
All right. So Cipollone could verify that, just as he could verify other details about what Cassidy Hutchinson said. Hutchinson says, Cipollone told me this, Cipollone told me that, and the fact of the matter is that's not privileged.
Okay, yes, that wouldn't be, I think. And now I'm thrown off by having briefly played the wrong music for our exit. But at any rate, we now have the correct music on tap, so I can regather the thoughts over the 2-minute break, and we'll come back to this. But that's they need to figure this out behind closed doors so that they know what kind of story gets presented. I wonder what he can testify about Hutchinson, though. We'll see. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Our music is a little screwy and will stick with us for a little bit longer coming out of the break, unless I just turn it down and make it fade away, because during the break I dropped something on the keyboard and punched another button and screwed everything up. But it doesn't matter. Now we're back from the break and we can pick up where we left off, except I don't remember where it was.
Well, let's talk about Patsy Baloney a little
Patsy Baloney. You should never have forgotten that. Okay, yeah.
All right. And Washington Post says he's a cigar smoker with deep ties to the Federalist Society. He has been a fairly reliable public ally of Trump, but he's not close to the former president.
Okay.
And he was viewed with some suspicion. You may recall Jared Kushner saying every time Cipollone opened his mouth, he was whining about something.
Yes.
Or words to that effect.
Well, that's the lawyer. He's telling them, he's the guy who's telling them you can't do that because Constitution, and they don't
right.
Like
Hutchinson, in her testimony, for example, portrayed Patsy Baloney as one of the last firewalls blocking Trump's efforts to overturn the election, and testified under oath, I would remind everybody, that Cipollone came to her with an urgent request saying something to the effect of, please make sure we don't go up to the Capitol, Cassidy. Keep in touch with me. We're going to get charged with every crime imaginable if we make that movement happen. Now, if he simply verifies, I said something to the effect of that, I mean, that itself is explosive because then it sort of verifies a lot of the other stuff that was going on there.
Yes.
Okay. This is from The Guardian. And it's about possible ties from Trump to far-right militias examined by the January 6th committee, and that's really what we're going to find out on Tuesday. The potential connection from the former U.S. president to the extremist right-wing groups came through her account of Trump's order to his White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, to call Roger Stone and Mike Flynn the evening before the Capitol attack. Again, the channel to the two groups. Now, all of this is important because unresolved questions for January 6 investigators remain whether Trump knew the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers would storm the Capitol, whether Trump was in contact with their leaders who have since been indicted for seditious conspiracy, and the sworn testimony from Hutchinson about Trump's order to Meadows raised the specter that Trump wanted to learn what plans had been drawn up for the extremist groups and wanted his aid, rather than doing it himself, to contact Stone and Flynn.
Yes.
And remember, there was a working group at the Willard Hotel, which we still need to learn a little bit more about, which included Giuliani and Stone. And we need to find out, what did Trump know and when did he know it?
Oh, that
now,
question.
This account of Trump's order, and Meadows supposedly was in touch with the Willard group. In fact, he wanted to go to the Willard Hotel group and was told not to by Cassidy Hutchinson, said that'd be a bad idea. But he called them.
How'd she figure that out?
The account of Trump's order was not the only link from the White House to the extremist groups. Hutchinson also testified she recalled hearing the terms Oath Keepers and Proud Boys whenever former Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani was around at the White House, and the war room that Hutchinson referred to appears to have been the one set up by Giuliani and Eastman and staffed by Boris Epstein, Trump's former strategist Steve Bannon, and Giuliani's aide Bernie Kerik. And that war room, which I think was at the Willard Hotel, had specific goals to help pressure the then Vice President Mike Pence to refuse to certify Biden's electoral win. Maybe that's where they built the gallows. I don't know. And sent it to the House of Representatives in a contingent election, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Stone also had a mid-sized suite at the Willard Hotel on 5 January and 6 January. It was in a different room that was totally separate to the war room put together by Giuliani and Eastman. And Flynn was also briefly there but didn't lead it. And so a lot of that still has to be, investigated. I'm going to finish up with this Guardian article, and then I'm going to move to Rolling Stone. Roger Stone has repeatedly denied he had anything to do with this. The far-right political operative based in Florida had close ties to the Proud Boys and its ex-national champion, Enrique Tarrio, who lived in Miami before his arrest, well before Trump lost the 2020 election to Biden. And when Roger Stone, traveled to Washington, D.C. before January 6th, he was accompanied by a man named Jacob Engels, a member of the Proud Boys from Florida, who served as something of a lieutenant for him on the day before and after the attack. Engels, in particular, with him, Stone appeared to maintain ties to the Proud Boys, even though during his stay at the Willard Hotel, it was a small group of the Oath Keepers who acted as his personal security detail.
Yes.
And so this really fascinating piece here from Rolling Stone is called Your Handy Guide to the Absolute Worst People in American Politics.
If you can even say they're in politics, but okay.
Well, they are. They're taking over the Florida GOP in Miami.
Oh, well, okay then.
With an array of hate groups forming in recent years, the threat of far-right violence has never been greater, but not all share the same goals and methods. It's by Tim Dickinson. And, of course, not everybody is Marcy Wheeler and can keep track in their head which ones are Patriot Front, which ones are Oath Keepers, which ones are Proud Boys. So this handy-dandy guide is really useful. Can't tell your players without a scorecard. The Proud Boys, founded in 2016 by Gavin
McInnes, yes, I think so.
Previously helped launch Vice Media.
Yeah,
Proud Boys started as a Street Fighter group that wanted to be real-life crap posters. They wanted to be those edgelords on the street, core beliefs, Western chauvinists, which is a fancy way of saying white supremacists or white nationalists. Yes. Despite surface denials of bigotry, the Proud Boys have acted as a gateway to the alt-right. They're basically men, and they have to be men. I think their charter is like no women, which is why they call themselves Proud Boys. And they have weird initiation rituals. I think of them as like the Hells Angels protecting Rolling Stones at the Altamont. They're sort of organized, but they're not exactly a militia. They're not exactly much of anything. They just like to fight.
Yeah.
Street brawlers. That's who I think of.
Right. I mean, I think that's generally the case, or at least their top figures and top leaders aspire to that, and the membership too. Although they're not always all that frightening looking as street fighters. Some of they want to be, and they're working towards it, but they kind of take anybody.
Right. Now, approach to violence, unlike the Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys don't tie themselves in knots looking for morally or legalistic justifications of violence. They're basically fascists.
Yeah, well, they like to fight. They don't really care what the rules are. Yeah, Oath Keepers, they are, they'll go sovereign citizen if they have to, but they're
right.
rules-based.
Oath Keepers are a little different, and we'll do them. But the Proud Boys are notable for one of their prominent people. Jason Kessler was the organizer of the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, which cost somebody's life.
Yep.
And also, Trump told the Proud Boys to stand back and stand by in a 2020 debate.
Instead of standing down, which is what the request was. Yes.
Yeah, and he said that's because somebody has to do something about Antifa and the left. Sure.
Yeah, Gavin McInnes, it's interesting that he kind of has stepped back from the leadership of the group. He defined what they were and gave them purpose. But the purpose was just basically to make people say, oh, my God, this is horrible. These are terrible people. Why can't we do something about them? And he really reveled in the fact that there wasn't much anybody was willing to do about the fact that he would go on TV and give interviews and where people would say, well, even murdery Trader Green goes on and says, well, I condemn violence in all its forms. And Gavin McInnes' thing was to go on and say, no, I love violence. We need more violence. Violence is the best way to solve your problems. And then people would say, what? Why? How dare you? And that would make him controversial and interesting. And they'd put him on more TV shows.
Right, and, so they're the brown shirts. They're the people you call to go break up a rally with sticks and clubs.
They're happy to do that. They enjoy the idea that it makes you mad that they're pro-violence.
Meanwhile,
even
the Oath Keepers,
violent, but they are
different.
Yes.
Okay, and in some ways less violent, but more scary. In 2009, they were founded by Stuart Rhodes, a former Army paratrooper and Yale law-educated attorney, and I didn't know this little factoid, who lost his eye in a handgun accident.
I did know that fact.
I figured you'd know that.
And he didn't lose it.
A gun
He shot it out. We know where it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I don't know where it is right now.
No, I'm at landfill, I guess. But
I lost it. I knew where it was yesterday, but somewhere around here. Through the Obama years, the group's membership grew into the tens of thousands.
Okay.
Which just reminds me, one of my good friends' dad, who was a World War II vet, didn't wear a patch. He actually had several glass eyes. Mm-hmm. And he had several because one was like regular looking and one was bloodshot. And so the bloodshot one was for when you were drinking.
Okay. He wanted to match.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
So, these things happen. Core beliefs, the Oath Keepers tout themselves as guardians of the constitutional order against what they perceive as encroaching federal tyranny. Yes, so these are the sovereign citizens people, but the part that's scary is they recruit heavily among veterans and law enforcement personnel.
Yes.
Appealing to their vow to protect the country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So these are the ones that recruit sheriffs and recruit from within current police officers. So when you have off-duty police officers show up at, January 6th, some of them might have been recruited by Oath Keepers.
Right.
But when you have somebody in military formation trying to do a wedge action to get into the Capitol, that might have been Oath Keepers as well.
Yes, that's the suspicion. And, they're both annoying and scary in slightly different ways. It's good to try and keep them apart. But
right, and then we say we don't attack people. We just attack those who attack us, just like your local police.
Mm-hmm. Versus...
Just like in Uvalde when we attack parents who try to save their kids. Yeah. But, we don't attack them until they try to do something like disobey orders.
That would be, I guess the Oath Keepers are a little bit more like that. The Proud Boys like to attack people.
Proud Boys are, although you're here, I'll just hit you.
Yeah, although then when they get arrested for it, then they fall back on it and say, well, they actually started it. They attacked me. And sometimes it works. It's right. Very annoying.
So Proud Boys are Unite the Right in Charlottesville, where we just make trouble. Oath Keepers were at the Bundy Ranch in southern Nevada with the sovereign citizen stuff.
Yes.
So slightly different, but you could see how they could work together.
Yeah, Oath Keepers are about they think they're enforcing a constitutional order, and so therefore they are more dangerous in the sense that they say, well, we'll actually take military style action against you. Proud Boys say, I don't know whether we're right or wrong. We just want to punch you in the face.
Yeah, they're not disciplined enough for military action.
Yeah.
January 6th connection, many Oath Keepers have been charged for storming the Capitol in tactical gear to disrupt the count by the Electoral College. Rhodes and nearly a dozen other Oath Keepers have been charged with seditious conspiracy to block the peaceful transfer of power by force. Mm-hmm. These Oath Keepers allegedly stockpiled weapons across the river in Virginia on January 6th, eager for Donald Trump to invoke the Insurrection Act and call them into a bloody battle against the president's enemies. So again, we'll have to see what the Rudy Giuliani, Roger Stone connection is there. And then, of course, there's the wannabes, who aren't either one of those groups. There's the Boogaloo Boys, probably most famous for trying to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan. There's the Patriot Front, which is out and out neo-Nazis.
Yes, they're the ones that like to get in trucks.
The Adam Waffen Division, who I don't even know are neo-Nazis. They're just plain Nazis.
Yeah, well, right. Using German, so okay.
Right.
Yeah, they're their own thing.
Key moments in Adam Waffen. Basically, they get themselves arrested.
Yeah.
They haven't really done anything else, but that's okay. I'm not trying to get them to compete
we don't want
with
them
these
to
other
succeed
groups.
in anything, right? But there are plenty of different groups out there. Well, that's why they had those. Why they tried to unite
the right.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's
and so
a bunch
the
of
right
Water
was
Buffalo
united
lodges.
in the garage prior to January 6th when Oath Keepers and Proud Boys met and decided who was doing what. Mm-hmm. And again, this is all going to be really interesting on Tuesday to see what happens.
Yeah.
And then I guess the one after that is supposed to be, okay, what Trump did on January 6th after things started, having set everything up beforehand. Mm-hmm. And so, that's how it's playing out, except that Adam Kinzinger and some of the other members of the committee have gone on record as saying, it's really interesting because all these other people are starting to come out of the woodwork to testify to us. So we have a lot more material, and we're not exactly sure when we're going to be done.
Good. They ought to have a couple extra hearings just to keep the momentum going and, see what kind of stories they come up with. And I guess they'll probably interview these people behind closed doors first, and then we'll start to see bits and pieces of their video testimony, and then maybe somebody's got a narrative that they need to put on TV.
Meanwhile, this is from Reuters, America's Stonehenge, which you probably never heard of.
America's Stonehenge?
Yeah.
Stonehenge.
That some see as satanic, torn down after bombing. A structure in Georgia demolished after being heavily damaged and attacked by unknown individuals. This is, again, in The Guardian, so it's always interesting to see people from overseas try to describe some of our peculiarities here in this country.
American Satan Stonehenge.
When you're driving cross country or when you're visiting places, sometimes you'll see a come here for this local tourist attraction. It's the world's largest pickle, or whatever.
Satan pickle.
People have different things that
they America's
highlight.
Stonehenge.
But this peculiar granite monument that some have dubbed America's Stonehenge, but a conservative politician condemned as satanic, has been torn down by authorities in rural Georgia hours after it was heavily damaged and a bombing by vandals.
Interesting. Is it in Murdery Trader Green's district by any chance?
It is 100 miles east of Atlanta.
Southeast. Okay, so it won't be her district. But people like to think that she's interested in bombs.
They're called the Georgia Guidestones.
Okay.
It said the remainder of the structure was deliberately demolished later in the day for safety reasons. Before it was vandalized, the 6-meter high, that's 19 feet, monument consisted of one upright slab at the center of 4 larger tablets arranged around it with a large rectangular capstone placed atop the others.
Yeah.
The collection of gray monoliths was erected in 1980 in the middle of a large field near the town of Elberton, Georgia, off Highway 77. and was listed as a tourist attraction by the state's travel site and the Elbert County Chamber of Commerce.
Why not? Okay. No one knows who they were or what they were doing. But we do know who they were and when it happened. And okay, so but how did it become satanic? A guy said so?
Well, the slabs were engraved with an enigmatic message in 12 languages calling for the preservation of humankind by limiting the world's population to fewer than 500 million people to live in perpetual balance with nature, according to official translations of the text.
So it's them.
It was also an astronomical calendar arranged to let sunlight shine through a narrow hole in the structure at noon every day to illuminate engraved dates. And nobody knows who funded it.
Ooh, mysterious, from the 1980s. Okay.
Right.
I mean,
so that's, one of those peculiar Americana.
They had to come up
things.
with some mystery, but I don't know who funded it. That's an interesting thing. We don't say that about the actual Stonehenge. Who were the people who built it? Oh, but who was behind the funding? Oh, good question.
Right.
All right.
As far as I could tell, and people who know better than me can correct me, but it looks like Elberton is in the 9th Congressional District, and the district is represented by Republican Andrew Clyde, who succeeded Doug Collins, if you remember him.
Barely. Okay.
Doug Collins was a far-right guy who was a Jim Jordan type who liked to, block everything, but kept running for stuff and losing.
All right.
So he was never able to move
he's
up.
gone. So good.
And now he's gone.
And then he built this Satan monument. I don't know why. He just did.
So prominent among the critics were the former Georgia gubernatorial candidate Candace Taylor, who you know well.
Oh, yeah, right.
Third place finisher in the 24 May Republican primary, who made removal of the monument part of her campaign platform, which got the attention of TV comedian John Oliver. So you may have heard about it through there. And after the bombing, Taylor suggested on Twitter that the monument's demise was an act of divine intervention.
And a bomb.
God is God all by himself. He can do anything he wants to, and that includes striking down satanic eye stones.
All right.
So basically, she's a vandal herself.
Yes, and a bomber. Let's just say it.
Right. The precise origins of the roadside attraction remain murky. It was built by a local granite finishing company at the behest of a mysterious benefactor who commissioned the work under the pseudonym of Robert Christian.
Christian. So there you go.
The Elberton Granite Association, which had maintained and preserved the stones, put the cost of replacing it at hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
Official descriptions say the monument has become known as America's Stonehenge, but The Guardian, which is, of course, a British publication, says the site paled in age and grandeur to the original Stonehenge.
Well, geez.
A prehistoric landmark in Wiltshire, UK, believed to date as early as 3000 BC, and which doesn't suggest that humanity limited itself to 17 people.
No, I didn't know this
Elon Musk
Thanos,
and 16 friends
angle that they had going on there, but okay. I mean, that's a little weird, and I'm not in favor of limiting. What did they say? 500 million people? That's a lot. That's
anyway,
even worse
sort of
than
weird,
Thanos.
but the fact that it got blown up is also sort of weird.
Yeah, and Candace, what's her name, just hanging around talking about how it got blown up, and maybe it was God, maybe it was Candace.
So that's pretty much what I wanted to present today. I wanted to talk about Boris Johnson, and I wanted to talk about know your players with the scorecard so that you're prepared for Tuesday.
Yeah.
But a couple other things to mention. Here's a piece in Bleeding Heartland, which covers Iowa stuff.
Certainly does.
Democrats gain after Dobbs. When analyzing how an event affected public opinion, it's important to compare surveys from the same pollster over time, and they're talking about the fact that, 2 to 3 point rise in the generic ballot. And we talked yesterday about how important or not important the generic ballot is. But this is the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Georgia Democrats rally against extremist Supreme Court. Then we have what's going on with the January 6th stuff. I'm just saying there's so many different moving parts and so many things going on. I'm not so sure that it's a given that the Democrats lose in November. They're actually looking pretty good in the Senate. If you look at individual Senate polls, for example. Warnock leading Herschel Walker, and I just can't but believe that Herschel Walker is going to say some other stuff that's going to be not so keen,
what he does.
in terms of how the populace takes it. Sure, the Republicans can win. It's a bad environment for Democrats. On the other hand, inflation is easing somewhat, and gas prices are coming down. So that must be because Joe Biden did that. Because after all, if they go up, it's his fault. So if they come down, it must be his fault too.
Haha, logic.
Well, logic is logic, and so I don't really care what Republican extremists say. The point is, how do independents feel about all of this?
Okay.
And so, it's all of a piece and goes along the lines of plenty of material for Democrats to run against Republicans, because it's always good politics to try to outline who you think is the most extremist part of the other party, to try to paint the other party as being completely extremist.
Yes.
Democrats, aren't as good at it as Republicans are. Republicans always run against Nancy Pelosi and San Francisco values, et cetera, or run against AOC, even though she's got nothing to do with anything. She's not leadership. But with the Republicans, it's what you might call a target-rich environment.
Yeah.
Because there's so many different Republicans you can pick and say, this one is extreme.
Maybe that's our problem. Too many to choose from.
But individual elections, individual states, individual senators know who to highlight.
Okay, well, that's
right. In Illinois, it's the gubernatorial candidate. In Georgia, it is the senatorial candidate, et cetera. So, we'll see. But it's really not so clear as to what's going on. And all the news isn't bad for Democrats. It's just not.
That's true. Although, that was what bothered me yesterday about finding out that, hey, here's some good news for Democrats on the generic ballot. And then, of course, the article that says, by the way, the generic ballot thing doesn't work anymore. Rats. Is this just because we were doing better? No, but it's just a weird coincidence. Fine. Okay. Well, it would be very difficult to predict the outcome. It's difficult to predict the outcome of any election, and this one may be more than most.
Right. Anyway, that's all I got.
Okay.
This is up to you.
All right. Are you sure Boris Johnson isn't around anywhere? We can't bring him in?
I had a lovely video clip, which I can't find, of it must have been an 8 or 9-year-old British girl explaining to the world why Boris Johnson was bad.
I remember this one, right? This was right? He had to go to the...
Boris Johnson?
He needed to go to the...
Everybody else had to stay indoors during the pandemic, but Boris Johnson was partying, and that's just awful. And Boris Johnson is the one who's responding, because his name was Boris Johnson.
Yes.
Like, it's not Boris or Mr. Johnson or Prime Minister. It's Boris Johnson.
Boris Johnson. And, she had some kind of...
and so she's probably the next Prime Minister, I'm thinking. Maybe, that's why I should look it up.
That's true. We should find out
more
who
popular
it is.
Than any of the
She
other
had a
people
phrase for what had to happen to him, that he had to go to the naughty...
Yes.
Bin or something.
You ought to go to the naughty room.
Well, I can't remember what it was, but it was really nice.
Something along that.
We should find it just for that phrase. So I can
exactly.
Figure it out. Okay. Well, very good. And, all right. Well, we're almost at the top of the hour. I think we can probably take it from here. I don't know where we're going to take it, but just not here, I guess.
And
all right.
So next week I will see you Monday, but not Wednesday, if I recall.
Yes, that is correct. Wednesday is a family occasion for me. So there you
we'll
go.
Have a rebroadcast of something. But, stuff
or
may
maybe
happen
something
between now and Monday. We'll set up the Tuesday hearings, and then on Thursday we'll cover what happened.
I could just tape on Tuesday. Here's what I think is going to happen in the fake version of the hearings, and I could do a 2-hour version of the testimony from Patsy Baloney, which I'm sure will be damning if I do it.
I have to say, with all this discussion about Boris Johnson, I miss the British speaker who retired.
Oh,
order!
They really could use some order.
We really could use some order.
Yeah, who's the speaker?
Take care,
now?
And I'll talk to you next week.
Okay, very good. Take a couple days off. We'll regroup, and we'll be talking in between then and now about the absurdities that happen on the Twitters. So look for it there. Thanks, Greg. And let's see, what things might lend themselves to just a few minutes of quick discussion. Oh, well, for one thing, the switch away, they got rid of my Macintosh tweet deck finally, and I now use the web version, which is fine, except that it doesn't have its own. It's not an app. I can't have it in its own easily accessible window. It now is a tab on my regular browser, and I can't navigate in between this and all the other fun stuff that I have for you quite as quickly as I used to. All right, I'm going to save the IRS story for after the break, because that's going to cost us some time to to get through. Let's see. How about I'll just tease you with this little story here too. I thought this was a long time coming. I'm surprised it took this long to discover this story. Trump's new moneymaker, political speeches to fans. Remember when paid political speeches were a terrible sin? That was when Hillary Clinton did them. But now, of course, it's great and America first and whatever. The former president makes millions, which is an odd thing for him to do, appearing at events that resemble his political rallies, probably because they are his political rallies. Josh Dawsey, Isaac Arnsdorf, and Sarah Fowler team up for this piece from today's Washington Post. Datelined South Haven, Mississippi. On a Saturday morning at an arena outside Memphis, Terry Owens joined the crowd streaming in to see the former president. That's Donald Trump. They lined up according to how much they'd paid, which is a very Trumpian thing to do, but not that far removed from many political rallies, as you know. At the far end of a white entrance tent, and what other kind of entrance would there be, near a bus wrapped with a photo of Trump's head on a muscular, shirtless body, were attendees who paid $55 for a pair of tickets as, quote, citizens, a general admittance option. At the front, closest to the doors, guarded by Secret Service agents, yes, we still pay for that, stood a presidential tier who shelled out $3,995 each. Owens, a 53-year-old nurse, bought a pair of VIP tickets for $800. She wasn't clear on where the money was going, nor did she care. That sounds very Trumpy as well. By the way, yes, back to that stupid theme of Trump's head photoshopped onto a muscular, shirtless body. That's their vision of the guy who wouldn't walk a mile to get himself to the presidency for life to appear at the Capitol and claim the mantle at the head of his insurrection. I couldn't get a ride, so I couldn't do it. That's basically it. But okay, he's very muscular, I'm sure. Anyway, we're a little bit behind again in our music. I really wanted to do my part, said Terry Owens, in contributing to where he can keep doing what he's doing, traveling around. And remember, he's supposed to be a billionaire, so you want to do your part in contributing to billionaire lifestyles. That's the thing to do. I know he probably doesn't need financial help by any means, but just to do my part in supporting him because I believe in what he's doing. Don't know what it is, don't know where he's doing it, don't know how he pays for it, but I want to be a part of it, says Terry. Okay, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, so where were we? We're right in the middle of reading about how Terry Owens, the registered nurse, paid $800 apiece for her tickets to go to an event that featured Trump speaking about nothing in particular and for no particular reason. That's his new gig, I guess. In fact, we find out, since she doesn't know where the money goes and she doesn't care where the money goes, she just wants to help out. In fact, the fees aren't going to Trump's Political Action Committee, his $100 million war chest. This event was not a Trump rally. At a Trump rally, at a real rally, apparently, the real thing, attendance is free, so this is something different. And what is it? Instead, it was a for-profit show, more like a rock concert. The proceeds benefit Trump personally as part of a multi-million-dollar deal to speak at the events, according to two people familiar with the matter who spoke on a condition of anonymity to discuss private conversations. By the way, what we're getting to here is that situation which I thought was going to kick off at Trump's inauguration parties, the idea of paying himself appearance fees at his own events. That is, I want to be treated like a celebrity, more so than a political figure, because, of course, you can make money as a celebrity, and you're not supposed to make that kind of money when you're a political figure. So, not surprising that it took him no time to figure this. I'm the only thing that I was puzzled about was that it appears to have taken him until after his presidency to start capitalizing this way, and I have to believe that there's probably evidence of the seeds of this scheme, if not this scheme itself, outright during his presidency and during his campaigning. And I guess he was probably advised by enough lawyers You need to structure it differently. We can still funnel the money to you, but it has to go a certain way and has to move through certain entities. And now that you're no longer president and not yet officially an announced presidential candidate, there's this opportunity to do these things for profit. So interesting that they were ready to roll this out. Where were we with this? Yes. The program, which is called the American Freedom Tour, which, that's a name that you could easily hang on any campaign effort. It looks no different to the outside observer from a campaign event. The program, called the American Freedom Tour, is the work of longtime motivational speaker promoter, with a trail of bankruptcy filings, which is probably part of his motivational speaking thing. You too can live high on the hog if you don't pay taxes and you don't really have a business and mostly you just deal in fraud and you just serially declare bankruptcy. No one can come and get you. That's the motivation. So a trail of bankruptcy filings and business disputes across the country. A Trump advisor said very little vetting was done on the organizers. The vetting was, can you put money in my pocket? Yes, I can. Now, part of the vet, like if you really vetted a person like that, you would say, well, can they? I know they're going to say that they can put money in our pocket, but, and who should be more adept at this than Trump, knowing that maybe you should dig in a little bit and find out whether they just say they'll put money in your pocket, but will actually abscond with the money. And then when you sue them, they'll declare bankruptcy, which appears to be the case with this guy, or what? But apparently, he does not check for that. He must think that there's no way to outdo him at this game. But it would be a lot of fun to find out that he was actually ripped off. That would be great. Anyway, a spokesman for the tour, Republican media consultant Larry Ward, said the 2020 election inspired the new business adventure. Yeah, he lost the election, so now we have to have a new business venture. Anyway, the tour was inspired by a nation of disappointed voters and a love for President Donald J. Trump, he said. Ward declined to discuss Trump's financial deal, but it makes sense. They knew that he had fanatical following, and people, they speculated, would pay probably lots of money to pretend that he was still relevant. So couldn't we capitalize on that in some way? Sure, you could collect that money from them and pretend he's still relevant. Trump's spokesman, Taylor Budowich, also declined to discuss his fees from the events. He said the former president enjoys supplementing his own rallies with speeches at events organized by other groups, such as the American Freedom Tour, National Rifle Association, Turning Point USA, and the Faith and Freedom Coalition. There is a tremendous demand for President Trump in every corner of the country, and he is driven by his love for America to continue leading the MAGA movement into 2022 and beyond by sharing his America First vision in front of massive crowds, Budowich said. The former presidents, other former presidents, I guess. Former presidents, including Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama, have often taken paid speaking gigs after leaving office and have been criticized for cashing in on their service. But those fees were generally paid by businesses, not individual fans who may not understand where the money is going. Clinton and Michelle Obama have charged for book talks with no ambiguity about the use of the proceeds. Paid presidential speeches are nothing new. It's nice work if you can get it, said Mark K. What is his name? Updegrove. Is that right? Updegrove? Anyway, his cousin up the creek. We'll tell you about that one. Updegrove, Updegrove, Updegrove. Well, Mark says, Mark is the president of the LBJ Foundation, okay, and author of Second Acts, Presidential Lives and Legacies After the White House. The difference here is Trump is doing this under the guise of a political rally, and there might be a little deception there. That's true. Like, no one thinks that a book tour by Michelle Obama is actually a campaign. Well, I'm not certain that that's necessarily the case. I mean, obviously, there's plenty of people who say, well, she's running for president. I don't know if she really is. But lots of times, other people who are perhaps more likely candidates, when they do, that's part of a candidacy all the time now. Very big part of a modern candidacy. Write a book, a biographical book, especially in the early stages of the primaries, and then you do a book tour on it and pretend that. But I guess what's different here is all of these events all look like political rallies. I mean, if you did a book tour event that was really just outdoors and had a gigantic stage and you gave a speech about politics, but then held up your book at the end, no one would say, yeah, it's a book tour event. So I guess there is some difference here. And interesting, yeah, and also, of course, where the funding comes from. It's also common, the article continues, for politicians to offer access to big spenders, though the money usually goes to a campaign, not just the candidate's pockets. Trump's money-making is especially brazen considering that he is the only modern ex-president to contemplate running for president again. You have a person who is effectively running for president who is accumulating financial IOUs, said Jeffrey A. Engel, director of the Center for Presidential History at Southern Methodist University. Donald Trump has never cared if his financial dealings appear improper. Trump plays by different rules. Indeed, many gathered outside Memphis drew few distinctions from Trump's prolific campaign fundraising. Stephen Maybank, 60, bought Citizen tickets with his wife after hearing about the event through texts and emails similar to fundraising appeals from the campaign. This is just another form of donation for us, except it's just, that's the thing, is that that's the way people think of it, and yet it's just straight into his pocket. And I imagine that they think, and I'm sure Trump would argue if the case required it, that, oh, well, I'm going to be self-funding my campaign, so it's really all the same. Giving the money directly to me, since I'm going to self-fund, is just the same as putting it in my campaign fund. Except he's really not going to self-fund, and it's all a huge lie and therefore fraudulent. Oh, well. Inside the arena, the former president's appearance had all of the trappings of a Trump rally. He hugged an American flag. He rattled off grievances about the 2020 election and the House committee investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol. He mocked transgender athletes and hinted at a third run for the presidency. The Speakers series has attracted more than 24 Republican luminaries, such as former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, talk radio host Dan Bongino, and right-wing influencer Candace Owens. Those are the hangers-on, and they continue to hang on. There's more cash to be had. One speaker who has participated in the program said they negotiated a deal through a speakers bureau and agreed to do the speech because it was so lucrative. Those who pay more are granted access to backstage events, such as photos and private Q&As. Top Dollar garners a Patriot experience with a private after party and access to Trump, though the site doesn't list how much this costs. The group declined to specify the rate, only that it was more than $4,000. The tour's organizer, Brian J. Forte, has produced events with motivational speaking stars such as Tony Robbins and entrepreneur Gary Vaynerchuk. I don't know who that is. Forte's seminars promise to teach strategies for business success, including personal reinvention. His own career path has gone through a winding chain of setbacks. But basically, by the way, teaching strategies for business success, this is essentially that it's Trump University all over again, except Trump University was sued out of existence not that many years ago. But okay. Forte built a Get Motivated events business with his sister and her husband, making $200,000 a year plus monthly bonuses, according to court records. But the couple divorced in 2011, leading to a messy ownership dispute, including lawsuits in federal court in Florida and Virginia. I've always been amazed by the sort of that angle on that business, the Get Motivated thing. And like, I'm motivated too. If I'm making $200,000 a year plus monthly bonuses, I'd say, look, I'm so motivated and I want you to have success in this too. I'm always interested in these schemes that are like, well, what you got to do is you're selling the idea that anybody can do this thing. Like, you should go out and start your own Get Motivated business. I did, and I'm making $200,000 a year. I'm very motivated. And it's terrific because I'm not selling anything in particular. I just tell you to get motivated. You give me money, and then you ask me, how can I make as much money as you? And the answer is, well, if you were doing what I was doing, you would make that much money, which is not true, actually. But after a while, I guess the market gets saturated, but never mind that logic. It's just, well, you're not me and I'm not you. But how did you make your money? I went around telling people how to make money. Oh, well, if I had only known that. But very natural for Trump to fall in with this guy. Anyway, the parties to all the lawsuits eventually settled, but Forte's business disputes did not end there. In 2014, a federal judge in Texas ordered a company he was working with to stop using the Success trademark that another firm owned. Interesting. Forte was also involved in ventures that were separately accused of stiffing a production company hired to put on events in Seattle and Portland. Sounds very Trumpy again. And using the Get Motivated trademark and customer database without making required payments. So, intellectual property theft, lots of trademark infringement. And then, of course, the old scheme of just simply selling the idea of selling nothing in particular to people and then stiffing the contractors who help you make it look like a show. Anyway, both these cases were dismissed. Ward said the vendor was paid and the trademark conflict was resolved. Forte lived large, driving a Maserati and flying private, according to court records and social media posts. But the expenses caught up with him. In a 2018 bankruptcy filing, he reported making $11,500 a month, but not enough to cover his expenses, plus more than $2 million in debt. The bankruptcy case was dismissed after Forte failed to make required reports and fees. So you put on the outside show of living high on the hog, but in fact your life is just one big ball of stress about when am I going to get caught with all this stuff. By 2020, Forte was 48 and unemployed with no income to cover his court-ordered child support, according to an affidavit. I am currently trying to get sponsors for new events, Forte wrote, and then he fell in with the guy who just until recently was said to be the most powerful man in the world, the leader of the free world, the ex-president of the United States, who only does classy things. Okay, his fortunes changed after the election. Forte was approached by Chris Widener, a motivational speaker who was veering from business into politics, with video blog posts echoing Trump's false claims of mass fraud. In an interview with the far-right broadcaster OAN, Widener said he wanted to create an event that would give solace to downtrodden Trump supporters. They're deplorable, they're racist, they're sexist, xenophobic, transphobic. They've been beaten up for 5 years, he said. He's supposed to say people are saying those things about him, not that they are those things. But okay, he's a great politician, isn't he? Wouldn't it be amazing if we did some rallies around the country and got conservatives together? What if we united the right, he's saying, so that folks could look around and say, I'm not alone. Wow. Okay, the tour debuted in October in Jacksonville, Florida. The stop near Memphis on June 18th was the 7th so far, with another planned in Milwaukee in August. Trump's speeches at the events are often shorter than his signature political rallies. In addition to Trump, his son, Donald Trump Jr., and other right-wing stars, such as pardoned author Dinesh D'Souza and Pinal County, Arizona Sheriff Mark Lamb. Oh, not even the other guy. Did the other guy die? I can't even remember. Well, now they got a new sheriff to do these tours. The tours featured speakers offering investment advice and promoting personal finance courses, dangerously close to Trump University, like he never learns. The Fort Lauderdale event, for instance, featured Bob Kittel, a professional speaker who teaches memory improvement techniques. Ooh, I could use that. He declined to comment. Melanie Cimino D'Angelo, a retired real estate agent who attended the event, said she and her husband paid about $100 for the follow-up financial seminar, but couldn't afford the 6-month financial coaching course, which she recalled costing several thousands of dollars. It was crazy. I don't think they got too many people, she said. If we could afford to venture into it further, they gave us a lot of good information. No, they wouldn't have. That's the thing. Ward, the tour's spokesman, said the programs come with 100% money-back guarantee. Ah, well, then, there you have it. At the tour stop near Memphis, Widener's vision connected with 18-year-old Maddie Cummings, a barista starting community college in the fall. This is exactly what she needs for her finances. Cummings said she wasn't able to openly voice her opinions at work without leading to conflict and wanted to attend the event because you're spending the day with people who had the same thoughts as you. Her grandfather, Robert Edwards of Hernando, Mississippi, bought tickets after seeing an ad on the highway for between $50 and $200 each. The event was staffed by unpaid volunteers who got to watch the speeches for free. Ronnie Schwartz, 57, from Marianna, Arkansas, who chairs her county's Republican Women's Club, said Trump inspired her to run for Justice of the Peace. Schwartz said she wanted to be able to tell her grandchildren, "I did everything possible to try to save us." She said, "I pray that we save us and that we can do this. That's what Trump has taught me." Schwartz came with Lindsey Palmer, who serves as election commissioner, that's not so great, in Lee County, Arkansas. Palmer declined to say if she thought the 2020 election was stolen. She does. "I think there was something going on," she said. Forte has embraced his new political persona. At the Memphis event, he declared, "There is no right and left anymore. There is right and wrong." Ho ho, so he's got a line for it. Okay, that's actually the conclusion of the story about the next chapter in Trump's grift and the minor grifters who are hanging around and picking up the detritus that falls out of the shark's mouth, I guess, and living that way. Just so you know where they're making their money these days. Speaking of the money thing, I told you about the IRS audits. Let's read that story. Why not? Michael Schmidt reporting it from the New York Times. What a coincidence. Comey and McCabe, who infuriated Trump, both faced intensive IRS audits. Who would have guessed it? Except if you had any familiarity with, say, the Nixon administration and how he used the IRS. The former FBI director and his deputy, both of whom former President Donald Trump wanted prosecuted, were selected by chance for a rare audit program that the tax agency says is random. We'll see about that, maybe in a series of hearings at some point. So, where are we with this? Among tax lawyers, the most invasive type of random audit carried out by the IRS is known, only partly jokingly, as an autopsy without the benefit of death. Okay, interesting. The odds of being selected for that audit in any given year are tiny. Out of nearly 153 million individual returns filed for 2017, for example, the IRS targeted about 5,000, or roughly 1 out of every 30,600 returns that are filed. One of the few who received a bureaucratic letter with the news that his 2017 return would be under intensive scrutiny was James B. Comey, who had been fired as FBI director that year by President Donald J. Trump. Furious over what he saw as Mr. Comey's lack of loyalty and his pursuit of the Russia investigation, Mr. Trump continued to rail against him even after his dismissal, accusing him of treason, calling for his prosecution, and publicly complaining about the money Mr. Comey received for a book after his dismissal. Never mind how much money he's stealing from people himself. Mr. Comey was informed of the audit in 2019. 2 years later, the IRS, still under the leadership of a Trump appointee after President Biden took office, picked about 8,000 returns for the same type of audit Mr. Comey had undergone for the 154 million individual returns filed in 2019, or about 1 in every 19,250. Among those chosen to have their 2019 returns scrutinized was the man who had been Mr. Comey's deputy at the Bureau, Andrew McCabe, who served several months as acting FBI director after Comey's firing. McCabe also was later dismissed by the Trump Justice Department after its watchdog accused him of misleading internal FBI investigators. Like Mr. Comey, he had come to be perceived as an enemy by Mr. Trump, who assailed him, accused him of treason, and raised questions about his finances long after pushing for his dismissal and prosecution, a pattern that continued even after Mr. Trump lost the 2020 election and began trying to overturn the results. Mr. Comey and Mr. McCabe, whose spouses were also audited because both couples filed joint returns, provided the letters initiating their audits to the New York Times. Mr. Comey provided the Times with a privacy release, allowing the IRS to respond to a Freedom of Information Act request about his case. Neither man knew that the other had been audited until they were told by a reporter from the Times. How interesting. That must have really been fascinating to them. The minuscule chances of the two highest-ranking FBI officials, who made some of the most politically consequential law enforcement decisions in a generation, being randomly subjected to a detailed scrub of their tax returns a few years after leaving their posts presents extraordinary questions. Was it sheer coincidence that two close associates would randomly come under the scrutiny of the same audit program within 2 years of each other? Did something in their returns increase the chances of their being selected? Could the audits have been connected to criminal investigations pursued by the Trump Justice Department against both men, neither of whom was ever charged? Or did someone in the federal government or at the IRS, an agency that at times, like under the Nixon administration, was used for political purposes, but says it has imposed a range of internal controls intended to thwart anyone from improperly using its powers, corrupt the process? Lightning strikes, and that's unusual, and that's what it's like being picked for one of these audits, said John A. Koskinen. I'm guessing the pronunciation of the last name there, but he's the IRS commissioner, or was, from 2013 to 2017. The real question is, does lightning then strike again in the same area? What's the saying they have about that? Does it happen? Some people may see that in their lives, but most will not. So you don't need to be an anti-Trumper to look at this and think it's suspicious. How taxpayers got selected for the program of intensive audits, known as the National Research Program, interesting, is closely held. The IRS is prohibited by law from discussing specific cases, further walling off from scrutiny the type of audit Mr. Comey and Mr. McCabe faced. That's kind of clever. The IRS Commissioner, Charles P. Rettig, who was appointed to the post by Trump in 2018, declined to be interviewed about the audits, discussions he may have had with Mr. Trump or his political appointees, or how compliance research examinations work. But in a written statement, the agency said he had no role in selecting candidates for an audit. Commissioner Rettig is not involved in individual audits or taxpayer cases. Those are handled by career civil servants, the statement said. And as IRS commissioner, he has never been in contact with the White House, ever, for any point, for any reason, sure, in either administration on IRS enforcement or individual taxpayer matters. Anyway, okay, that's better. He has been committed to running the IRS as an impartial, unbiased manner, I guess, from top to bottom. Well, people have their doubts. Pressed on whether the IRS would look into the questions raised by the Comey and McCabe audits, the agency noted in its statement, without referring specifically to their cases, that whenever it learns of allegations of wrongdoing, it reaches out to the Inspector General for Tax Administration in the Treasury Department for further review. Asked about the audits, Trump, through a spokeswoman, said, "I have no knowledge of this." He went on to point to reports from the Justice Department's Inspector General that were critical of Comey and McCabe, which has nothing to do with this. Former IRS officials and tax lawyers said that given the array of reforms imposed on the agency after the Watergate scandal, they believed it would be difficult for a president or an appointee to direct an audit at a political opponent. I don't think so at all, but okay. I think it would be unexpected, and there were supposed to be mechanisms in place to make sure that that didn't happen. But what if a president and the people he appointed all just said, screw it, we think this would be really fun anyway, so let's just do it. Like, there's nothing standing in the way of that except getting caught. And if they don't appear to care about that, or when they do get caught, the New York Times stands around and scratches its head and strokes its chin and says, well, gee whiz, it could be coincidence. Well, then I guess now you know why they try it. Okay, let's see. But the officials and lawyers who all said it would be difficult to make this happen said that because Trump repeatedly tried to use the powers of the federal government against his rivals and to overturn the election, and because the IRS conducted an extensive audit on two people whom he routinely pushed to have prosecuted, the tax inspector general or Congress should investigate the circumstances. It'd be a good idea. Mr. Comey's audit, which lasted over a year, I guess it is over, revealed that he and his wife, Patrice Comey, had overpaid their 2017 federal income taxes and they received a $347 refund. That's pretty good. So leave it to Trump I'll rake him over the coals. I'll show him a thing or two, and then I'll talk about what a fraud he is and how he's shortchanging the IRS on his taxes. Even though I shortchange the IRS on my taxes all the time, and I say that makes me smart, I'm going to catch him out. And then it turns out, oh, look at that. Not only that, but does he pay his fair share of taxes, but he pays even more than his fair share. He gets $347 back. Wow. Anyway, I don't know whether anything improper happened, but after learning how unusual this audit was and how badly Trump wanted to hurt me during that time, it made sense to try to figure it out, Comey said in his statement. And there's a bit more about this that we can share after this.
Sup fam, it's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. This is an extraordinarily long article, and I don't think we'll make it all the way through this, so we might jump out here and start in on something a little bit different. There's a number of other things I wanted to bring to your attention, but we'll sum up here by continuing with McCabe's questions about this, or rather, was it Comey's statement about this, and then they go to McCabe on this. Comey just being very cautious, very Comey-esque, saying, I don't know whether anything improper happened, but after learning how unusual this audit was and how badly Trump wanted to hurt me during that time, it made sense to try to figure it out. Maybe it's a coincidence, or maybe somebody misused the IRS to get at a political enemy. Given the role Trump wants to continue to play in our country, we should know the answer to that question. So, yes, we should, but he's not jumping to any conclusions. McCabe said that his audit determined that he and his wife, Jill McCabe, owed the federal government a small amount of money, which they paid. He said they now believed the audit had been concluded. The revenue agent I dealt with was professional and responsive, McCabe said. Nevertheless, I have significant questions about how or why I was selected for this. And I guess maybe just a little bit from the next section here, explaining the program here. The audits conducted on Comey and McCabe and their spouses, according to the letters they received from the agency, were carried out under an IRS research program to learn who is and who is not paying their taxes. I mean, that would be legitimate research. I mean, as a topic anyway, right? The agency uses these compliance research examinations to determine the tax gap and adjust its dragnets, including a closely guarded formula that is intended to catch tax cheats. The number of audits carried out declined, beginning with returns for 2015 because of budget strains, before turning up somewhat in 2018 and 2019, the most recent years for which figures are available. Your federal income tax return for the year shown above this is, I guess, what comes with your letter, was selected at random for a compliance research examination. The letters to both the Comeys and McCabe's say, we must examine randomly selected tax returns to better understand tax compliance and improve fairness of the tax system. We'll give you the opportunity to explain any errors we may find during the examination. In many instances, the agency catches taxpayers who undergo the audits understating their incomes and overstating their deductions, forcing them to pay penalties and interest. Even if a person has done nothing wrong, the process can take months and cost thousands of dollars in accountant fees. Unlike a typical audit that asks individuals to explain a specific part of their taxes, these audits comb through the full return, forcing taxpayers in some cases to go to great lengths to essentially recreate their finances for the year in question. Those being audited are often forced to produce bank records, copies of checks, receipts, and letters documenting donations to determine whether they are properly reporting income and expenses and they are not hiding assets. In the case of the Comeys, it cost $5,000 in accountant fees. The IRS agent conducting the audit spent at least 50 working hours on it, including meeting face-to-face with the family's accountant, who drove several hours to meet the agent, according to internal IRS documents produced in response to a Freedom of Information Act request by the Times. Along with having to produce all of his financial information, like brokerage and bank statements, Comey gave the IRS a copy of his family's Christmas card that had a photograph to prove that he had the children he had claimed as dependents. Boy, you get the idea? The audit went so deeply into his finances that his accountant had a back and forth with the agency about how much the Comeys had spent on office supplies purchased more than 2 years earlier. In a series of documents the accountant provided to the IRS in February of 2020, the accountant said that Mr. Comey, originally going by memory, had provided far too low an estimate about how much he had spent on them. I have attached an invoice to support the cost of the MacBook Air for $1,761, Mr. Comey's accountant wrote to the agent in a letter. He also bought a printer and toner, charged on his American Express card on September 29th of 2017. Mr. Comey has requested a copy of the statement for that month. I will also fax that document to you when I get it. You see what level of granularity they're going down to. You get the idea. Well, anyway, of course, then there's the next section on politics and taxes and perhaps why they were targeted for these invasive audits. And some reason Mr. Trump kept saying he was subject to audit but never produced any results. Anyway, just something to think about. And we'll see whether anybody involves themselves on Capitol Hill in investigating this question and whether there are any further developments. And if so, we will return to them. But for the moment, I'd like to turn to a couple of other stories that I think are worth sharing. One, very much on the speculative, I guess, side of the ledger. It's not in a major publication which has reason, or we would have reason to believe, had vetted the story for legal purposes, etc. We're going to turn straight to social media. Something I saw shared on Twitter but grabbed from Facebook, which, raises questions, but seemed like A, valuable information, and B, likely to pan out to be true, given that there were a number of links provided. But what I have here is a tweet from Elad Nahorai, who identifies on Twitter as writing for the Daily Beast and the HuffPost and a couple others, who says that they've come across this Facebook post. A Highland Park resident has shared her experiences with the alleged shooter. She claims that he was a known agitator who joined a group of pro-Trump and militia supporters in the summer of 2020 to intimidate residents. She claims there are others who pose a danger as well. This changes the complexion of the story somewhat. To date, and it hasn't been that long, but to date the narrative has been, or the emerging narrative has been, of a troubled person who's a bit of a misfit and who definitely was. I think there's enough documentary evidence that this person, the shooter, was present at Trump rallies, and at least we don't know for what purpose yet, but made a practice of making photos of himself at the rallies available online, photos of himself, wrapping a Trump 2020 flag around himself like a cape, lots of things that would lead people to conclude that it's reasonable to guess that perhaps he had some affinity for the Trump movement after all, which may or may not color his decision to shoot, to plan a shooting and to carry it out. But this person claims to have had some personal experience with the shooter and says, no, it's really, you don't have to hedge your bets about this. This isn't necessarily, I think the storyline that was emerging was of a person who was, so strange and such a quirky misfit person that they might have been associating with the Trump movement more to get a rise out of people or to appear like an iconoclast than anything else, rather than having a deep commitment to the Trump MAGA movement, as it were. But this person claims, no, it is exactly what it looks like. And this is, forgive me, it's small print here, so I'll do my best in reading this screen grabs of her Facebook post. Rachel Wachstein is the poster's name, and there's a lot of risk that comes with putting yourself out there, but I guess she's already seen kind of what the other people involved here, including the shooter, have to bring to bear here. But now that it's sort of escalated to shooting, well, it's awfully brave, if nothing else. Now, again, it's all unvetted at this point, but this is the story that's being told. Bobby Crimo, as she refers to him, and we had a thing about not publicizing the kid's name, but what the hell? It now for a different reason needs to be shared. But Bobby Crimo is not a lone wolf. That's sort of the opening line here. On July 4th, 2022, Rachel says she was heading to breakfast. This really sets the tone for the fact that she was downtown, or whatever you would call that area of Highland Park, in the area of the parade route, and was on her way to the parade when she saw people panicking and running from the shooter, and she didn't really process exactly what was going on, just sort of mentally didn't process what was happening, setting the scene for her discovery of the shooting, which really isn't particularly relevant to what she has to say. So I'm going to skip down a little bit. Not that I don't want to give her a full due here, but let's focus on what she has to say about the shooter and his association with others. She notes here that the shooter wasn't caught immediately, and that the police seemed just as stunned and unprepared as the rest of us. The town went on lockdown as the police and FBI worked to uncover his identity and find him. When it was announced around 6 p.m. that the suspect was caught, his face and identity were known to me. In fact, had I been asked for a short list of people in the area who I thought had the potential and motivation to cause such harm and destruction in our community, his name would likely have been on the list. What I know for certain is that the shooter knew my name, address, and the make and model of my car. He and his associates had doxed me in the past, creating a flyer calling me a dangerous communist with my picture, name, address, and a call to action that I must be stopped. They were flyering the neighborhood with this. Why was I on the radar of a 20-year-old kid and his band of hoodlum friends? Because I had dared to counter-protest their Stop the Steal events in 2020. So apparently this was a big deal for him too. He spent his time involved in the Stop the Steal part of the Ultra MAGA movement. I've heard on CNN and other news sources that there are only a few photos of the shooter with Trump flags, and his major motivator was a love of death and destruction. Not some, that was like I said, the narrative that was emerging was, well, he might not be so much a Trumper as he's a nihilist, and he thought that this was somehow contributing to his love of death and destruction, to be seen with Trump paraphernalia or seen at Trump rallies. But Rachel Wachstein disputes this. She says this is blatantly false. There were multiple news articles from Patch and the Chicago Tribune featuring photos of the shooter at these MAGA events. I recognized him right away as part of the group of local angry white young men who had previously waited for me after protests to threaten and harass me, and came to a Protect the Results vigil that they were holding on December 12th, 2020 in Highland Park's Sunset Park, where they did the Nazi salute multiple times and screamed the following at our small group through a bullhorn. And this is a quote of what they were shouting at them when Crimo and his friends showed up to counter-protest their counter-protest of Stop the Steal. You see what's going on here? Now, when I read this, I thought, this is an extraordinarily long quote for her to remember with such precision. But as it turns out, of course, they have captured it on YouTube, so they know exactly what this person was saying. So one of Crimo's associates here shows up with a bullhorn and shouts out, "We refuse to accept a socialist, communist, and anarchist America. We pledge to stop a Biden-led communist regime that will kill the American dream and the traditional way of American life. We demand Biden-Harris never. We will not stop until the Antifa scum and Black Lives Matter monkeys," wow, "get put in their place. Enough of this left-wing violence." How about that for a closer? Enough of this left-wing violence. Just like Ted Cruz says. Oh, yeah, it's the left wing that's violent in all of this, except, you're the shooters. The police were there. They did nothing other than tell us to leave the park at dusk when we were already heading to our cars. Gee whiz, thanks a lot. In Northbrook, the Stop the Steal rallies were violent. People who I was counter-protesting with were hit in the head with thick flagpoles by the future shooter and his associates. Another one, again, I just don't know why they allow this to go on. If you go to a political rally that, for a presidential candidate, you can't bring in flags. They stop you and say, no, you can't you can't even bring their campaign signs in because they're afraid you can use the sticks that the things are stapled to as a weapon. And this is like the favorite dodge for these Patriot Front type groups and these Stop the Steal people. Well, we're carrying flags and the flagpoles, and then they go and they hit people over the head with them. They did it to the cops at the Capitol, and still around the country, cops continue to allow people like Patriot Front, etc., to show up with the flagpoles, wearing shin guards and helmets and elbow guards and all sorts of makeshift armor. And it gets very frustrating and annoying after a while for people to say, well, of course the police let them do it. They're sympathetic. They're the same people. I know, I get it, they are. I just don't know why they don't even pretend. Or certainly somebody on the force somewhere is not like that, but I guess they are afraid of being ostracized on the police force. Anyway, that aside, this is very much how this kid was spending his time in the time leading up to the shooting. He's one of them. And that's why it's important to keep track of who they are and what they're doing and to take it seriously. Anyway, so what was going on? Oh, yeah, so they were hit over the head with the flagpoles by the future shooter and his associates. The police, once again, did little when their side crossed the street to confront us repeatedly. Very proud boy in that respect, right? I did reach out to police, and so have others. We've been speaking out about the harassment and behavior of local MAGA fanatics, but have been ignored, brushed aside, or even made to feel as if we provoked them. The shooter joined a group of pro-Trump and militia supporters in the summer of 2020 to intimidate residents with their aggressive Trump train through the heart of Old Downtown, the location of his future mass shooting. The shooter is not a surprise. Don't believe the news reports. Bobby Crimo is a known agitator, and there could have been interventions before my neighbors' bodies lay strewn across the parade route. That is a fact. He is a homegrown terrorist, as she puts it, who flew under the radar because no one was willing to see the signs. There are others like him that are even more likely, in my opinion, to cause harm and devastation in Highland Park and surrounding communities. We know their names. We know their history of extremism. They walk amongst us, waiting for the next opportunity to unleash their fascist desires of control and death on our communities. I have called the police. I have called the FBI. I've spoken out publicly, and I continue to do so despite making myself a target. The truth is slowly leaking out as some media outlets do the investigative work that should be done. You will see that Robert Crimo wasn't just a crazy person with violent tendencies. He was part of an organized movement to instill fear in anyone brave enough to oppose the fascist threat to our country. He's no lone wolf. There are 100 Bobby Crimos waiting in the wings for the chance to punish liberal America and anyone who they see as not embodying traditional American family values, like murder, obviously. I encourage anyone who reads this to do a little research on Bobby Crimo and his associates. It's all there in the news articles, photos, and videos. Yesterday was a MAGA-inspired crime. This would, of course, been on July 5th that she wrote this. A MAGA-inspired crime against the community of Highland Park and humanity at large. I have put so much energy into trying to bring attention to this issue with little impact. Hopefully, some of you will help me to keep the pressure on our law enforcement and our community leaders to do something before the next attack. And then there's a list of linked articles in here. They're not clickable, of course, for me because I just have the screen cap, but I guess you could go to Facebook and find them. A Newsweek article, I guess, post-shooting about Robert Crimo himself. Yahoo News piece here, Trump protesters spread hate. I can just see parts of the URLs here. Patch piece that she described, a Trump rally planned on Friday near something, but I guess it names Crimo as one of the organizers, or at least he appears in the photos, something from the Daily Herald, something from Human Events, worlduncensored.com, IllinoisFamilyAction.org, NBC News here, and then, of course, at the end it says, learn more about the harassment of Highland Park organizers in the 2 years leading up to the mass shooting at this YouTube address, which she lists. I have seen the video, and it's basically her and her group's documentation of the intimidation tactics that she says Crimo and associates were using against them for having the temerity to counter-protest their Stop the Steal events. So, we'll see whether any investigative reporting digs up any more about this guy and the people that he was associating with. But just wanted to let you know that there's a sort of shift in the narrative out there, something to be aware of and to be open to if more writing begins to emerge about the shooter and his association. So, okay, just be ready for that in case that happens. Let's see. Other news to share with you. This was an interesting bit. I didn't even realize this was going on, but it turns out, I think we maybe have made brief mention of it the other day, that the truck convoy people are apparently back in the D.C. area, and I'll tell you how effective their blockades have been. I didn't notice, and I didn't even see in the news anywhere that they were doing anything until I learned that the leader of the trucker convoy has been arrested in D.C. David Riddell, or Rydell, I'm not certain how he pronounces the Riddell, but Riddell charged with disorderly conduct and other offenses in connection with a demonstration on I-270 in Maryland. That was the original attempt at their convoy/blockade. The leader of a convoy of truckers that has protested by driving slowly around the Beltway was arrested Wednesday morning in the District of Columbia after the group drove vehicles to a street on the National Mall. D.C. police said David Riddell, or Rydell, whatever it might be, was wanted on a warrant from Maryland. Maryland State Police charged him with disorderly conduct, disobeying a lawful order from police, and you know how they feel about those, and willfully driving a vehicle at slow speed, impeding normal and reasonable traffic movement. The group has been called the People's Convoy. A small group spun off, though, and rebranded as the 1776 Restoration Movement and drove on Interstate 495 and 270 on July 4th, slowing traffic when everybody was home doing their own thing. That's why we didn't notice. According to charging documents filed in District Court in Montgomery County, Maryland, a state trooper found multiple trucks stopped in the southbound lanes of 270 in Gaithersburg on Monday morning. Drivers were honking their horns and waving as traffic backed up a half a mile, police said. The charging documents said drivers directed the trooper to a tractor trailer driven by Riddell at the front of the line. Police said he had a timer set for 10 minutes and told them that was when the trucks planned to resume moving. The trooper took Riddell's information from his Ohio driver's license and warned him that he could be cited or arrested. Not long after the trooper gave Riddell his license back, according to the documents, the timer expired. The trucks then drove south on 270 at about 40 miles an hour before making a U-turn and heading north on 270 and out of the county. Authorities said in the charging documents that state police learned from social media that he was staying at a camp in West Virginia, which is not considered a fixed address. Police said they took out an arrest warrant because without a fixed address, they had no way of sending him charges and court orders. His actual home address apparently is in Hillsboro, Ohio, as listed on the warrant. As of Wednesday afternoon, court records do not show Riddell making an appearance before the court commissioner, and it appeared he remained in custody. Well, how do you like that? I don't want to read too much further on in all this. Just wanted to let you know that they were back and attempting their blockade again, except this time police weren't standing around for it and proceeded to arrest him. And, well, couldn't have happened to a dumber guy, I guess. All right, last thing I'll read for today, and I'll read it from the Wonkette review of it, even though it means I'll probably have to use, or maybe because I'll have to use the censoring horn on it, rather than reading the dry news report about it, because, hell, that's just so much more entertaining. We knew this was coming. They've threatened it before, and now I guess they're trying to, threaten it again because they hope to make the news. GOP, the GOP, they say, will investigate the January 6th investigators for investigating what the GOP did on January 6th. You see what's happening here. Evan Hurst writes this piece for the Wonkette. Axios is the one doing the dry reporting on this one. Axios reports this morning, what was the date on this piece? July 6th, so yesterday morning, that congressional Republicans are promising to take revenge, of course, if they are fortunate enough to win/steal back control of one or both houses of Congress in November. Nobody can say Republicans don't continually show us who they really are. They're mad at Democrats and the two remaining honest House Republicans, both of whom sit on the House Judiciary, or rather the House January 6th Select Committee, for investigating and exposing what happened that day and in the surrounding months when Donald Trump attempted to overthrow America and a whole, crap load, let's say, of his loyal ass lickers, which I think we can actually say. Anyway, some of them in Congress. And they, of course, tried to help. So they're going to make them pay. And here's a quote, I guess, from the Axios article. Key House Republicans are threatening to subpoena records of the January 6th committee if the GOP retakes the majority next year. An escalation of the party's effort to undercut the investigation's findings. I don't even know if it's actually an escalation. I think they've threatened this before. But by the way, the committee expires. It won't exist in the next Congress, not just because Republicans might take over, but because that's the end of the chartering of the committee. So I don't know exactly who's supposed to comply with the subpoena, but I don't know why they would anyway. So basically, Evans says they're going to steal the evidence. Is that what they're saying? Have House Republicans rented one of those big pods or something? Are they going to put it in a driveway at Mar-a-Lago where Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger can't get at it? Please explain. Back to Axios. Ever since the January 6th committee subpoenaed GOP members of Congress, including House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy and Representative Jim Jordan, Republicans have been threatening unspecified subpoenas in retaliation. And Evans says they don't even know what they want to subpoena, do they? Probably any emails where somebody does critical race theory or the committee makes plans to meet up for drinks at a drag show. Axios again. While Republicans have been eager to move beyond what happened on January 6th, many want to use a GOP-controlled majority to frame their own narrative of what happened that day and also raise questions about the January 6th committee's work and spending. Well, okay. Anyway, the real point here is that they have plans to organize their own investigative committee and I guess maybe subpoena the members of the January 6th committee and all of their records, which is, I guess, something they can try to do, but they do run into a couple of problems. Like, for instance, for one thing, if you don't comply with the subpoena, what can be done? Of course, they could charge them with contempt of Congress, but under the usual route of charging them with statutory contempt of Congress, that, of course, means that you would have to ask the Biden Justice Department to prosecute these members, mostly Democrats and I guess a couple of Republicans, for contempt of Congress for failing to comply with their subpoena. And whether or not they're actually going to do that is highly doubtful. And then, of course, even if they were to prosecute them, if they were to take that up, then you're talking about having the executive branch prosecute members of Congress for participating in a legally constituted investigative committee, which would run smack into the speech and debate clause. It would be awfully difficult for them to be able to bring them up on charges and make it stick. Of course, there's always inherent contempt, and I suppose in a Republican majority Congress, you couldn't put it past them to try it, but that would be an enormous escalation. Then you're talking about arresting and imprisoning sitting members of Congress, which, you know, hey, maybe sometimes you got to do what you got to do. We really ought to be doing that now with the insurrectionists, of course. But, you know, that Democrats say that's just not done. Republicans, I think in the end, will say that also is just not done. They just want to make some threats and make a show of threatening these things that they think will help them in the election. But what a situation that would be. Wouldn't that be interesting if finally the barriers to inherent contempt against sitting members of Congress are broken down for us by the Republicans?
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Just want to hold that possibility out there for you to think about. I wouldn't call it a silver lining. There's no silver lining to losing control of the House. But at any rate, time now to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And guess what? He's got some very interesting things to survey from around the country and around the world that will interest you. Stay tuned.